The second kiss in our curriculum is by the modern sculptor Constantin Brancusi, who is from Romania and is sculpting in the era known as Cubism. So, first of all, Brancusi is known as the father of modern sculpture. In fact, some stories around him and his art are very interesting in the progress of what is considered sculpture and abstract sculpture in particular. This version of the kiss that you looked at on the first slide was one of six. And one version was exhibited at something called the Armory Show. Now, I'd like you to be familiar with the term Armory Show. And it was an exhibit done in 1913. And it's known simply as the first large scale exhibit of modern art. So again, that's the Armory Show, and I believe it was in New York. And what Brancusi is really known for and embraces is staying as close as possible to the authentic nature of the material, um, not making the material really be something it's not. And you see that more in the kiss, really, than you see in the piece on the screen. The piece on the screen is more of a example of his second kind of philosophy of art, which is to break a subject down to its most pure form. So the sculpture in front of you is called Bird in Space. And that could possibly be something that College Board shows you. But I want you to look at it for a while and just consider, how is this sculpture breaking down a bird in space to its most pure form? And then I'm going to talk about some other things and come back to that. But another thing about Brancusi and some other artists like Picasso and Gauguin, when he's painting in Tahiti, that these artists are inspired by what they call the truth of and the purity of these so-called, and notice I put it in quotation marks because it's a bit of a controversial way to label the art from non-European cultures, but the so-called primitive art. Again, pretty, I know it's a label that has a lot of connotations to it that are negative, but and the way they get exposed to the arts that come from non-European cultures is not always a good, honest, fair way. So they're getting arts from taking advantage perhaps of these non-European cultures and or stealing the art pieces, not the artist in particular, but collectors and businesses and so on. So the Europeans seeing those primitive art forms are a lot of times seeing the art that has been illegally collected or unfairly collected. And that's a whole issue that we'll be getting into in class. But the authenticity of the materials, the simplicity of the shapes, the authentic kind of embracing of sculpting in natural materials like wood and stone was very appealing to Brancusi. And the simplicity of the shapes that they would utilize in sculptures, I think, spoke to him aesthetically. So, and it shows even more where he worked in Rodin's studio, Auguste Rodin, who did Burghers of Calais, and he only stayed there for 2 months. I think he respected Rodin, but Rodin was a giant in the world of art at that time, and he just felt like he couldn't progress in the way that he wanted, perhaps. So going back to this piece, the bird in space, which is supposed to be a feather, like the essence of a bird is flight and a feather. So a collector was bringing it over, I think, from Europe to America and got stopped at customs. And at the time, they would tax certain things like industrial items and not tax fine art. And so the customs agents believed that this couldn't be fine art. And they asked, what is this? And it's like, oh, it's a sculpture of a bird and bird in space. And the customs agents are like, no way. So they charged him the tax because they thought it was an industrial item, and the issue was taken to court. And the judge basically decided that art doesn't have to depict nature faithfully. It can be abstract. It can be something very much that doesn't necessarily look, anywhere close to necessarily what it looks like in nature. And that's an important case that comes about, and it has to do with Brancusi's piece here, Bird in Space. Now, getting back to our piece, though, that's part of our curriculum with the KISS, for sure, Brancusi is breaking with the academy traditions that have come out of the 1800s into the early 1900s, and really breaking the traditions that come from sculpture since the classical era of Greece. It is more in line almost with the archaic of Greece and before, and it has clean geometric lines and shapes. He's gotten here a block of stone, most likely limestone. And he stays as authentic to that block of stone as possible. He's not trying to alter it too much from what its original form is. He takes his burin, he incisors it with lines to suggest hair. He subtractively carves away a little bit to give rectilinear arms, relief sculpture for the eyes, and a line down the middle to distinguish that there are two people here, not just one. And also, to keep the stone as natural as possible, we're not going to go through the traditional route of highly polishing it so that it looks smooth and glossy like most would do. On the left-hand side, you have probably who is the woman, that figure. She has a slight bulge there in the right under the arms, which most likely would suggest her breasts. She has also a slightly thinner body than the male and also a slightly smaller eye. And I love the eyes and the mouth here because although the suggestion is that there are two mouths puckered up in a kiss, two eyes in profile, it almost creates this illusion that there is one eye, like a cyclops, one mouth, almost even one body. But I do love the backs where their arms, and hands come together and clasped as they embrace each other tightly. The collector in the United States who commissioned this art piece wanted it on a base, and Brancusi was like, "Oh no, this would be completely wrong to his vision of the art piece. It would be too much an academic tradition to put it on a base." The patron really was insistent, so Brancusi kind of compromised and said, "All right, I've got to put it on a base. Fine, but I'm going to make it this very rough, very natural looking wooden base." And so he kind of made a base that would be more acceptable to him and his need to keep the materials pure and the art piece as naturalistic as possible. And then here are two of the images that we've studied: the Kiss by Klimt, and then of course now Brancusi's on the right. And then on the left, I've included Rodin's version of the Kiss, just so you can see we have the exact same subject, but in different eras and different concerns, different places. And it is just so interesting to see how different Kiss images or how different art pieces that have the same subject, how they can look completely different based on who the artist is, where it was made, when it was made, for whom it was made. All those things are essential. The context is essential to understand why these pieces look the way they do. And then here are just some other images. Since there are six Kiss images completely, I wanted to show you two others, and those are one in the center, the other one in the lower right, a face on the left that Brancusi does, and then one of my favorites on the upper right is called the Newborn. And I love that one because it looks like an egg, and it looks like something is like crying, which is the essence of a baby. Right? You come from the egg there, and you communicate your needs by screaming and crying. So it really does showcase Brancusi's ideals. So what I would do for formal quality and function here with Brancusi, Function, honestly, again, aesthetic, because his aesthetic is the simple, geometric, kind of cubic aesthetic, keeping the authenticity of the material and simplifying the detail so that you would not obscure the naturalism of the material. So I think that works best. For formal quality, then I would definitely do shape. Form, again, the simple geometric element to this that you're, and again, that comes from the initial material being very cubic in shape. To maintain that and to keep it pure is Brancusi's goal. So I don't know which one you prefer out of all of those, the two that are in our curriculum, and then there's the Rodin one, but they're just so interesting to look at. And all of them are lovely and interesting, just different. None are better than the other. They're just very different. So that again is The Kiss by Constantin Brancusi in the cubic era of our timeline in the early 20th century.